A couple of building safety notices first, get them out of the way. We have got fire exits, which is good. We're not anticipating any fire alarms that are planned, so if there is a fire alarm, it means there is a fire. If you're in the main body, the best way is to go out through the door you came in, or the big door to the left of the back hall there. If you're on the front with me, or if you're very close over here to this door, you can go out of this door, and we would suggest that you gather on the church lawn at the front. I would be the last person to leave the building. I will don a swanky high-vis vest, which is hidden in the lectern over there, and I will check all the rooms, and everybody else must leave. Is that clear? Marvellous. That won't happen, but I've said it. Toilets are out through the entrance you came in and opposite, and they're marked. As toilets, they have automatic lights, so don't look for the light switch. Okay? It's hot. We have given the candidates bottles of water that they will have to ration. We don't normally promote single-use plastic because we are a Bronze Award Eco Church, which you can see. But we couldn't fit tables on here for jugs and glasses, so any candidates who prepared and brought their own drinking vessel that's reusable might get extra brownie points. Okay, so that's the building stuff. That's all straightforward. We have got some rules for the debate to make it.
There's water for.
Oh yes, that's the third thing I was going to say. It's hot. We've got water for the candidates. We've also got water for the audience. If you're feeling faint and overcome and too hot, there is a table at the back with assorted ramshackle jugs, that the only ones we could find in the cupboard. The teapot is also full of water. So if you've used the last of the water, just go in the kitchen. You can see where the kitchen is, and you can fill up a jug or fill up a glass and help yourself to the water at the back because it's hot. There's nothing more we can do about that. We haven't got air conditioning. So that's the building. Rules. There's rules for the audience and there's rules for the candidates. We'll do the audience first. I've got my serious glasses on. This is serious business now. Okay. Rules for the audience. Okay. These are the candidates. Okay. You're the audience. People have come to listen to the candidates, not the audience. So don't allow your question to be a speech. If you wanted it to be a speech, you should have stood, and it's too late. So, questions short, to the point, and on an issue likely to be of wider interest than just your own pet back garden topic. Also, questions that haven't already been asked. I am reserving the right to rule a question out of order if it has already been asked, or if it is about a sycamore tree in your back garden that your neighbour has cut with a chainsaw, or something like that. So, bear that in mind. Don't be embarrassed because I rule your question out of order. Just think, has it already been asked? We're only going to get 9 or 10 questions in. So, don't waste people's time with a question that's already been asked. Straightforward. It'll be chosen at random from the audience. I will invite people to raise their hands. When I choose somebody, Father Will here will run over to you with a microphone. It will be live and it will be on. You don't need to tap it. You just need to hold it close enough to your mouth and give your short, succinct, relevant question that hasn't been asked before. And then the candidates will all get a go to answer it. So I hope you will respect that. Wait for the microphone. You won't get a follow-up question. And that's going to be that, so make the most of it. Okay, so that's your rules. Stick by them and everyone will be happy. Candidates' rules. Here we go. They already know these, but I'm just going to spell it out so you understand how it works. Are all going to have 2 minutes for an opening statement to tell you who they are and anything important that you need to know. They've already done this, they're well practiced. Then for each question, they're going to have 1.5 minutes to answer. I'm going to discourage questions that are aimed at one particular candidate, but if that happens and I allow it, then everyone will also still get their chance to respond. So everybody will respond if they wish to each question. You don't have to, you can pass if you wish. They'll get 1.5 minutes, the bell will go, Terry will demonstrate the bell. Right. You will stop speaking when you hear the bell, okay? That's quite simple. And you don't have to wait till the bell goes to stop speaking. It's not the law, okay? Please try and answer the actual question asked. 1.5 minutes is quite a long time if you use it well. If you spend half of it slagging off one of the other parties, you'll quickly run out of time. So this is an intelligent audience. It's a sophisticated audience. They don't need you to tell them anything about the other candidates. They'll make their own mind up. So use the time you've got to talk about who you are, what your policies are, and what your party is about. That would be great. People will notice when you don't do that. If I was a betting man, which may not be wise, in the current climate, you'll probably get a question about potholes, so be ready. Please only speak when you're at the microphone this side here. I hesitate to say on the right. On my right, we have this microphone, and on my left, we have this microphone. Please only go to the microphone. It's very straightforward. That's the end of that. Use the microphone because we have people here I know who depend on the loop. Even if you think you've got a big boomy voice, you might have, but people depend on the loop. I do. So we need you to understand the microphone. Ditto with the questions. So there's all the rules. You may not be expecting this, but I am going to begin with a prayer. This is a church, but that's not the reason we're going to begin with a prayer. I heard some politicians, some former MPs, discussing the job of what it is to be an MP. And they were saying there is no actual job description for being an MP, like you get for most jobs. There isn't a job description. And one of them said, and was unchallenged by the others, they all seem to agree, that the closest they get to a job description that is often repeated is the prayer that is used at the beginning of business at the House of Commons every single day that the Speaker's chaplain reads. So I thought we'd use that prayer. And if you're a praying person, then you might want to add Amen at the end. If you're not a praying person, you might want to listen to the words and think, are those sensible job description words for an MP? And if so, do I hear evidence of it in the answers that we're going to hear this evening? So here is the Speaker's chaplain's prayer that is read at the beginning of every day's business in the House of Commons. Lord, the God of righteousness and truth, grant to our King and his government, to members of Parliament and all in positions of responsibility, the guidance of your Spirit. May they never lead the nation wrongly through love of power, through desire to please, or through unworthy ideals. But laying aside all private interests and prejudices, keep in mind their responsibility to seek to improve the condition of all humankind. So may your kingdom come and your name be hallowed. Amen. Amen. In the House of Commons, say mankind, but we're more advanced in the church than the House of Commons, so I changed it to humankind. So we're going to crack on, and in alphabetical order. So starting with Chris on the right, I'm going to invite the candidates to offer us 2 minutes of who they are and what they want us to hear.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. When I arrived, our moderator said, I'm going to seat you on the far right. I said, I'm more of a Ken Clark man, really, myself. He went, no, geographically, I'm going to put you on the right of the stage. And I said, fine. It's lovely to be back here in Sawston. My parents lived here for many, many years on Linton Way near the school. And we've spent many happy hours over there in that beer garden, which I think many of us would like to be in right now. We could have an open-air version of this, perhaps. But as well as being a village that has a great deal of good memories for me and for my family, it's also one that has a lot of very bad memories indeed. It was actually at the Granter Medical Centre that my mother had her diagnosis of early onset Alzheimer's, a diagnosis that she wouldn't make it through more than 18 months from her diagnosis to her death. Now, my mother was just 59 when she died from early onset Alzheimer's, and it's a disease that I've been campaigning on now for many years since she passed away. It's actually the #1 cause of death, dementia, in the UK. A lot of people don't know that. It's a pretty terrifying statistic, and it's also an awful diagnosis to have to cope with, both as an individual and indeed as a family. And that is one of the reasons I'm standing in this election and I've sought to represent our community in Parliament, is that I want more done both on research within dementia for treatment and care, but also for adult social care generally, because it was the adult social care system here in South Cambridgeshire that stepped in to help our family, and I know that that is a part of the system that is struggling, just as our NHS is. We need to do better than we are doing at the moment. We need to get those waiting lists down faster than we are at the moment. There are various ways that we're doing that, and I think we'll have an opportunity to talk about that tonight. But I'm not going to stand up here and pretend that everything is going to plan. We've been dealt an incredibly difficult hand over this Parliament. We've obviously had the war in Ukraine, we've obviously had COVID, we've spent billions of pounds worth of taxpayers' money, I think rightly, supporting businesses, families, various parts of the economy during that time. I knew that was going to happen. I look forward to talking to you all tonight in greater depth.
Thank you, Chris. I should have said Chris is the candidate for the Conservative and Unionist Party, but I think that was clear. So Harrison Edwards is our Reform UK candidate.
Hello, I'm the Reform Party candidate. I'm Harrison Edwards, and I'm 24. I think Reform's a party that doesn't need much introduction, but I'm here tonight to hopefully explain all the policies to you and answer any questions you have. I think that the core policies we've got that are quite appealing to our contract are: we're going to reduce immigration, stop the small boats, end the waiting lists, good wages for a hard day's work, and reduce energy bills. Thank you. I look forward to your questions tonight.
Thank you, Harrison. Well before the bell. Miranda Fyfe is our Green Party candidate.
Not as tall as them. Hello, Sawston. It was odd for me to come straight into Sawston this evening because for the whole of the summer term until just last week I've been coming to Sawston frequently to invigilate your children's GCSEs, so it's nice to meet some of the parents this evening, I hope. Some of you here in Sawston who may not know my face might recognise my name from your very lively village Facebook group. There I've often found myself pointing out that the failings of our local councils, whether it's potholes, bins, public transport or whatever, are fundamentally caused by the political decisions made in Westminster, because the councils rely for their day-to-day running costs on what has been an ever-decreasing amount of funding from central government. Fortunately, it seems that finally the Tories are well and truly toast. We can only hope that the new government will make better political choices. Anyway, why am I standing for MP and why for the Green Party? Well, my friends will know that I've been wanging on about climate and environment matters for a very long time. One, who's now a very dear friend, recently reminded me, in fact, that the first words I ever spoke to her was when I challenged her for having come to pick up her kids from primary school in her car. I walk the walk, I cycle my cycle, and I do actually use the buses to go all sorts of places, rather than just complaining about how unreliable they are. So after years of small-scale local activism, and a fair amount of reading about economics and the links between monetary growth and climate breakdown, I realised that the Green Party is the only party which embraces the need to put climate action and social justice at the heart of all policies. So I'm standing for election now because I want to be part of making better, fairer decisions. The presence of Green Party MPs in Westminster after the 4th of July will offer everyone in the country real hope and real change. Thank you.
Thank you, Miranda. James Gordon is an independent candidate for this constituency.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. I'm standing as the independent candidate, and my name is James Gordon. You're here because you're interested in politics, and to me it's fascinating that you're here now, when on television in about an hour's time there will be a debate between the two people who think they have the right to be Prime Minister. I suspect that you are dreading watching that programme, because you will find that those two go hammer and tongs at each other, rather than working on the constructive question of this country is in a terrible mess, and I mean a terrible mess. There are 4,500 candidates standing for the 650 constituencies at stake this time round. There are 461 independents. I don't think it would be a bad thing if there were a sprinkling of independents in the House of Commons. I'm part of a little network of, there are presently 15 of independents, but more are joining as each day goes by. We share a common platform, we share a common view, which is that we will quite happily support sensible policies from whichever party proposes them. We will fight very hard to make sure taxes are raised fairly and spent wisely. And that's our programme. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Pippa Halings is our Liberal Democrat candidate for this constituency.
Thank you, and good evening everybody, and it's so lovely to be able to just tell you a little bit more about ourselves, about me, what I care about, why I'm standing. I'm a mum, and I moved here to South Cambridgeshire with my husband and 2 children in 2012, but you may be able to hear a little bit from my accent. I grew up in Hull. My mum was a staff nurse working nights and my dad a GP. And I think it's those deep roots in the NHS that have really fostered my commitment to community service. I accompanied my dad on his visits, the home visits to patients, and just really seeing that caring about people, but also getting a sense of the deep inequalities that exist in our communities behind closed doors. And I've always been very, very active in our communities, whether that's leading our girls' football team or then standing to be elected as a district councillor, 2018, being re-elected in 2022. As we answer your questions this evening, I think what you'll hear is how I and the Liberal Democrats, what we really deeply care about. Firstly, I care very, very deeply about our local environment. I care deeply about the NHS and adult social care, and it was at Adam Brooks that I'm indebted to the doctors and nurses for saving my husband's life from leukemia. And as Liberal Democrats, we care passionately about giving voice to our local community to shape the future of our area. And I think those are values that many of you share, as I've talked to literally hundreds and nearly thousands of you recently on the doors. So I think there are 3 reasons I'd like to say that I would want you to vote for me. Firstly, if you do me the honour of electing me as your MP, I will fight to ensure that your voice is heard and understood in decisions taken locally or in Westminster. Secondly, any vote for a Lib Dem is for a strong local champion who will fight for the NHS, who will fight for those struggling with rents and mortgages, and will bring change to here. Enough is enough. Vote for me.
Thank you, Pippa. And finally, for our opening statements, Luke Viner is our Labour Party constituency candidate.
Hello there. Brilliant. My name's Luke Viner. I am the Labour candidate here in South Cambridgeshire. A little bit about myself. I live in Fulbourn, and I've lived in Fulbourn now for about 5 years. I actually came here for work, so I work in the tech and security sector and have done for my entire time of being here. I arrived here in about 2019, so just before the COVID crisis actually happened. I'm also a parish councillor as well in Fulbourn, so I've been on the parish council for quite a bit of time now, and it's a very rewarding bit of work, and we do some really good stuff locally. Why I'm doing this is a question I kind of ask myself every single day at the moment. It's a very tiring and very scrutinising process, but it's also very good. And part of the reason I did it, and this is again the only time I'm probably going to try and bring up my age, I was actually born in 1997, about 20 days after Tony Blair got elected, which means I spent the first part of my life under a Labour government. And coming from backgrounds that, my dad was a self-employed carpenter, he didn't have a lot of money. But coming from that background, it actually really made me just realise when I was an adult how much better my life was because of the government that we had back then. When I went to school, my class sizes were under 30. My teachers didn't go on strike because they were well paid. They didn't have to go to Asda or Tesco to buy school supplies because the local authorities are well funded. We had an NHS that worked, highest patient satisfaction. My parents could get a GP appointment in 40 hours if they needed to. These are things that, on the second half of my life, when the coalition came in and the Conservatives came in, I really saw a dramatic change. And I want the opportunity now to be able to go and bring that back and really revitalise South Cambridgeshire and the country. I want 2024 to be a chance when South Cambridgeshire can have a Labour MP that can hopefully, fingers crossed, on the 5th of July, work with the Labour government to get the change that this area needs, and I really do believe we can bring that. So thank you for coming, and thank you for hosting, and hopefully you'll get an opportunity to ask all the relevant questions you want, transport, housing, all these extremely important issues. So thank you very much.
You were nearly there without the bell, but what a professional lineup of candidates we have, because it's not the first time they've done it. So they are well versed in timing their replies, so thank you very much for that. It has just occurred to me, this is the first Hustings meeting that I think I have chaired where there isn't a sitting MP. So that's interesting, is that none of these are the sitting MPs or have ever been MPs before, which isn't usually the case at a Hustings meeting. So there you are, you've got 6 fresh faces to be answering our questions. So we're going to just crack on with the questions. Remember the rules. I'm anticipating, because of the timings we've got, that each question might take about 10 minutes. By the time we've asked it and by the time everybody's had their 1.5 minutes, it's going to take about 10 minutes per question. We've maybe got an hour and a half and a bit, so we might get through 10 questions, which is maybe more than they get through on question time, but so manage your expectations, okay, with how many questions we get. Some people will be disappointed. We are going to offer the opportunity afterwards for any candidates who wish to stay. It's not compulsory, and it's not part of the deal, but we are going to keep the building open, so if people do have pressing questions that they really want to ask, and some of the candidates have stayed, then there may well be that opportunity too, so don't despair. So we're going to launch, remember it's hands raised, and I will look for the most politely raised hand in the building. So who wants to have a go at our first question? I suppose I did say that people sitting on the front row are more likely to catch the chairman's eye, didn't I? So I'm going to invite this young lady here with the colourful t-shirt to offer our first question. No pressure.
I just need to give a bit of context to it. So my name is Abby and I'm a local teacher and member of the National Education Union. So 57% of South Cambridgeshire schools have less funding in real terms than in 2010. So for example, Chris's school, where his nephew will start in September and his sister works, will be £34,000 worse off. This is not the world-class education system that we were promised, and our children and young people deserve better. What are you and your party going to do to turn things around?
Thank you. For the questions, I'm just going to start at a different point going along the line. So I'm going to ask Harrison to go first, if Harrison wishes to have a go at this question.
So, currently schools are drastically underfunded in both classroom size to pupil amount per head, per se. So what the reform's going to do is we're going to stop the VAT changes to private schools to allow the constituents to take the burden away from public schools and to reduce classroom sizes. In terms of education on a wider spectrum, we're going to cut interest rates on student loans, so we won't be paying that 7.2% interest. And we're going to offer free university degrees to STEM subjects. Cool, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so the Green Party is different from the primary coloured parties in that it seems none of them want to raise taxes. They're all trying to fiddle about business as usual, tweaking around the edges. What the Green Party recognise is that our society needs better funding all around, all around, in every area of public life, public spending. So the Green Party, as you may hopefully have heard on the television, we do plan to introduce a wealth tax so that those of you who have £10 million or more in assets, I'm afraid you'll have to pay 1% per year from those assets. Those of you with £1 billion or more will take 2% per year from those assets. There are other changes, so we'll even up capital gains tax and so on. Sorry, that may come up later, but the point about schools is that one of the many wonderful things we'll be able to do with all that extra tax revenue is massively increase teacher funding, school funding generally, including a £2 billion uplift for teachers. The school funding total budget will be up £8 billion. This will include, extended early years cover, extended provision all the way through, from early years right through to higher education, hoping to reduce class sizes to 20, and hopefully all that will sort out those teacher vacancies.
Well, thanks for that question, Abby. The short answer to your question is more money needs to be thrown at schools in the short term. The medium and long-term answer is that you're going to have to look at really how we provide education as a whole, and that's a massive subject. We need to look at why we teach things the way we do. Can we learn from new technologies? Children basically learn from screen these days outside the classroom. Should there be more screen learning? I don't know. But the short-term answer is throw more money at it.
Thank you. I'm a former teacher, was head of department, and it's absolutely heartbreaking when I talk to the heads and other teachers of our village schools around South Cambridgeshire. Across the country we know that there have been deep cuts in real terms to schooling over the last 14 years, and that really in Cambridgeshire we have known that we've got the lowest funding formula here, which is crazy, absolutely ridiculous, and especially given the growth that we have in the area. What would we do as Liberal Democrats? We would put more funding into schools. That would be into paying conditions for teachers who are really struggling. It would also be about the crumbling schools that we have, as you've heard from the rack ceilings, which is this aerated ceiling blocks, meaning that some of the schools buildings are unsafe. We would really tackle what is one of the causes of the biggest problems in funding, I think, at the moment, is how to fund special educational needs and disabilities within our schools. That is completely underfunded. It's a deep black hole within the county council funding, which then has to pass that on to the schools, which means that children with special educational needs, if they manage to get a diagnosis, which is really difficult at the moment, come into a school with no special teaching assistance. That's awful for everyone and the teachers. Finally, we would have a mental health professional in each and every school, both for the well-being of teachers as for children.
Yeah, as I explained in my opening statement, this is one of the core reasons I actually got interested in politics in the first place. As has been pointed out quite a bit now, Cambridgeshire receives some of the lowest funding in comparison to other regions in the area. And it's kind of confusing because, we've had a majority of Conservative MPs in this area for the entire time, so you'd think they'd be advocating to get that funding to this area, but apparently not. A quick anecdote on this myself. I explained how I grew up under a Labour government with the educational services. I also play the trumpet, and one thing I was able to learn at state school under the last Labour government, and I wanted to do GCSE music at my high school, and I wasn't able to because under the coalition the arts budget was completely scrapped, so I didn't get that. Who knows what my life would have been like if I had that opportunity to go down that route, but there we go. The Labour Party wants to have 6,500 new teachers in specialist subjects. We need to make sure that we're getting that. At the minute we're having a lot of teachers teaching subjects like maths that are PE teachers or substitute teachers. We also want to increase 3,000 new nursery places as well, that will be pledged on with primary schools, and also have free breakfast clubs to ensure that kids who do go to school are able to get a good meal at the start of the day. How are we going to pay for that? So we're going to have we're going to remove the tax exemption that currently exists for private schools that will allow us to invest in the state school education system. It's a very, very important thing to get those numbers going up. I also want to talk very briefly on apprenticeships and going on after school. My brother is a carpenter, similar to my dad's family trade. He was actually encouraged to go to university when he had really no need to go to university or didn't really want to go to university. And we need to encourage that.
Thank you, Luke, and thank you, candidates, for sticking with the rules. So
was, of course, directed at me and my family in a slightly odd way, but we'll let that bit pass. Yes, we do need to deliver more funding into our schools, and it's actually, Luke was saying, we've had Conservative MPs, and what are they doing? Well, Anthony Brown, our sitting member of Parliament, has been running a campaign on this for many years, has a lot of detail on his website in terms of the progress he's made, because rural schools, particularly rural schools in Cambridgeshire, due to the funding formula, are receiving a lower amount of money per pupil, and that's wrong, and it's something that he's campaigning on, and something that I will campaign on as well. In terms of what we're doing within education, obviously you will have seen in the latest league tables, particularly the PISA league tables, that we are making very dramatic progress. The introduction of phonics into our classrooms is really helping in terms of how people are learning, the ways and the methods in which they're learning. We're seeing improvements, and they're shown now actually across Europe and in global league tables, so we're making progress there. We're trying to support parents as they balance their work life and their education. Obviously we've now got 30 hours of free childcare every week for working parents. Lots of parents I speak to on the doorstep are saying this is making a really material difference to their lives. And on special educational needs, of course, we've already put a new SEND school into Gamlingay. It's an excellent school, and that was directly pushed by the government in response to local people saying we need a better capacity here for SEND, and that is what we've delivered. We've obviously got more to do.
Thank you, and I repeat my apologies, it won't happen again. So, who wants to dive in for our second question? Okay, the young man with the brownie orange shirt by the pillar at the back there. I'm going to call either on a young man or a young woman.
Not that young, but thank you. As a local family, finding local services diminishing whilst our tax burden is rising, and will also be next year, in the fiscal year. What demonstrable improvements will my family and I experience locally under your party, and specifically your representation in South Cambridgeshire? And also my daughter, who will be voting in 5 years' time in the following election, hold you to account on that basis. Thank you.
Thank you. Around there.
Hi, thanks. Well, so I didn't catch how many children you've got, but if you've got more than two, you've only got the two, so you're not affected by the two-child benefit cap, but child benefit, two-child cap. But if you did have more children, which you don't, you would have been better off. The Green Party would like to work towards, universal basic income, which would help everybody. You probably wouldn't benefit from that. We would introduce free public transport for everyone up to the age of 18 and everyone in education, so that would benefit your children when they're getting around, when they get to the point of being able to get around. It's hard to know without knowing your personal circumstances what exactly benefits would you, but we'd like to think that with everyone, all the public services being better off, that everyone will benefit. Thank you.
James?
James, I didn't catch your name.
It's Jochen.
Jochen,
Yeah.
thanks for your question, Jochen. Well, I wish I could hold out hope that things are going to suddenly get better, but I think they're going to get worse. I think this country is in a hell of a mess. We've got very used to having European-style levels of American styles of taxation, and an expectation of European-style support from the state, and it's just unfathomable. We just can't do it. The government spends £1.2 trillion on your behalf. That works out about £40,000 a household, well over £15,000 per human being. I'm not sure it gets terribly good value. We can pretend that we can spend more money without raising taxes, but I don't think we can. I think we have to put taxes up. We can pretend, as the last 14 years have proved, that we can put things on tick. We can suddenly borrow more money, and we're now our debt levels are nearly 100% of GDP. But all you do there is store up trouble for yourself, because, to go back to Abby's question, we spent more servicing the interest on public debt than we spent on schools, and that's a disgrace. But I'm sorry, we're in for a tough time. I don't think there's anything I could do if I had a party. I don't think there's anything that party could do, and I don't think anything of any of the parties on the stage can do very much. We're in for a very tough 5 or 10 years.
Thank you. And yes, having been 6 years in a local council and knowing how that funding just gets cut and cut and cut every year, and therefore what happens to local councils, the only thing they can do then is to put the local council tax up, is a very perverse situation. What the Liberal Democrats would do, because what everyone is saying is we seem to be paying more and yet getting worse and worse and worse services for that. What the Liberal Democrats would do is to restore the funding levels to local government as they would have been, as they were in 2015. And that would be multi-year rather than local authorities competing for different small pots of money. So you have to contract people who can look out for what money there is and then bid for it. You actually just know what you've got, what you can plan for, and have to have fiscal prudence around that. But Mila, what would be the benefits? Well, one of the things we know is a problem and a scourge, and it's just really a metaphor, a symbol for the state of the country, are potholes and the lack of investment in that. We would take money out of the highways budget and put it into potholes maintenance. So we'd be doing less highways creation of new roads, putting that into maintenance of the roads we have. We would create a national active travel strategy where we have improved public transport and cycling. And then really for your daughter, for your children, it would be about, they're being priced out of any chance of getting homes, rental or affording them. So we'd be looking at affordable homes that are built here close to families and work, a mortgage protection fund, rental protections. But finally, what I'd say to your daughter, actually we'd be giving children, young people, at the age of 16 the vote, so she could vote earlier and hold us accountable.
Thank you. Luke.
Yes, completely right. We have the highest tax burden in essentially 75 years and some of the worst services we've had in a very, very long time. So the disparity has gone completely the other way. I'm going to talk about a few things that can be done locally. Obviously, the NHS is extremely important. Local GPs are extremely important. I spoke a bit earlier how back in the day you could get a guaranteed GP appointment in 48 hours. Those days are gone. Being able to have more doctors and nurses is essential. We want to abolish the non-doc tax status and get some money into the National Health Service to hopefully bring that back in. I also want to talk about, because it hasn't actually been spoken about in any of the hustings we've done so far, but it's very important, crime and the issues we have there. We don't really feel very safe in our streets anymore. You don't really get to see any police officers either. We've had a situation where actually the number of PCSOs, neighbourhood police officers we had in 2010 was about 200. We now only have about 20 for the whole of the Cambridgeshire region. It's gone down massively. We need to increase that. I know that Labour's policy is to get 13,000 new PCSOs trained and in. As your local MP, I will be fighting to make sure that we get a fair share of those in this area. I also quickly want to talk about transport, because buses, as you know, is a big thing. We want to franchise the bus network around here. Dr. Nick Johnson, our mayor, is doing a good job in trying to get that going forward. The Labour Party's position is to improve the legislation nationally to get that going. And also, he's just introduced these new Tiger passes, which would mean that your daughter is able to go on a bus for £1 with these new passes, anyone under the age of 25. So those things are there. To hold accountable, I'm hoping in 5 years' time, you'll be able to see the sheets of things moving, and then you can judge us on that.
Thank you, Luke.
Jochen, thank you so much for your question. There was a bit of it that really struck me, which is what are we personally going to do in relation to the points you've made. So you will know, many of you will know, that I'm running a campaign to stop our council here working 4 days a week being paid for 5. So all of your council tax went up earlier in the year by the maximum amount possible, I would add, and we're now paying people to have a day off. Now, that's great work if you can get it, but I don't think it constitutes very good value for money for most of the people in this room. Now, some of the roads in this village, Link Road being one of them I used to drive down, look like they've been attacked by a bomber from Duxford. They've got so many holes in them. They're in a terrible state. The pavements are in a terrible state. When I was out here last week talking to people, they were saying they're having to take their prams and mobility scooters off of the pavement and onto the road because the weeds have got so bad, because the Liberal Democrat-run County Council has banned the weed killer required in order to deal with it. So some of the people on this panel are talking about, well, who's responsible for this? Well, the Liberal Democrats and Labour are responsible for how your councils are run. They're responsible for how the money is spent. And they say, well, we have no choice but to put council tax up. Yet in neighbouring East Cambs, a Conservative-run council, we've frozen council tax yet again with the express reason of helping with the cost of living. So this is about choices. I will stand up for this community and say, no, that is not a good use of money. It's taxpayers' money, not government money, and we cannot see it spent in this way.
So the state of services is in dire need. It's terrible in terms of potholes, in terms of police numbers, in terms of waiting lists. What we're planning to do is scrap a lot of the waste spending that's going on at the moment. And what I hear a lot as a rhetoric is there's not enough money. In 2010, HMRC collected £450 billion in tax revenue, and in 2023 they collected £800 billion in tax revenue. So it's not a fact of they're not getting budget increases, it's that money is being spent poorly, and you're being asked to pay more tax and more in services to keep a dying system alive that's not being properly looked after.
Thank you, Harrison. Please don't forget there is water at the back. It is hot, and we do not want anybody fainting with heat or excitement. So, third question. I'll take the glasses off and I can see. I think I'm going to go head for the back. The young man in the tablecloth shirts there.
Standing up. I've lived here for 25 years locally with my family. In the last 10 years I've noticed an awful lot of building happening, transforming our landscape, with very little idea as to who these houses are being built for, no record of who they've been sold to or who they're being sold on to. Now the late unlamented Michael Gove is proposing to parachute 150,000 new houses. I haven't seen any reference to that in local manifestos of the candidates, but perhaps there is something somewhere. And the idea is, certainly for the Conservatives, and I suspect Labour will rubber stamp this, that there will be an independent corporation, a sort of housing corporation, which will simply make decisions. And I'd like to know from the candidates how you would defend and think about the infrastructure, the need for growth without reference to what the local population wants, how you will challenge government over this proposed massive building over an awful lot of our attractive countryside. Thank you.
Thank you. James?
I'm sorry, sir, I didn't catch your name.
Dominic Bell.
Dominic, thanks for the question, Dominic. It's a wide-ranging question, isn't it, really? We live in a hugely successful city, on the outskirts of a hugely successful city. Cambridge is one of the booming towns, partly because of the biomedical campus and the attraction of talent and intelligent people round and about. There's no easy answer. By the same token, you say, I want my children to be able to buy a house locally, but I don't want to see houses built. In terms of Michael Gove's plan, I haven't heard of Michael Gove's plan. I think we can consign it to the waste bin of history on the basis that he's no longer part of the government, notwithstanding his party is unlikely to be in control. Planning presently is in the hands of the district council. They put together a planning document framework for the district, and arguably at least you have your chance to contribute to that process in terms of which district councillors you elect. I think an individual MP couldn't do very much more than say, well, as the plan for South Cambridgeshire district is developed, as MP I take a great interest. I'm not wanting to see things built for being built's sake, and it has to be done as an entire framework. So yes, if you want to build houses, then you need to provide the infrastructure to support it, and most importantly, you've got to make sure you've got the basics like enough water to support the development you're planning to do. So generally speaking, unless you can justify the development with the infrastructure, I'd be against it, but it's really a question for the district council.
Thanks very much. I'll start with the Goveville idea of 150,000, started at £250 million, 150,000 in some of the documents, which basically is a plan that comes imposed from government that's used to centralising things and not allowing for locally plan-led development. Imposed on us would ride roughshod over local democracy through this development corporation, which would take away voice from local communities and from the local planning authorities, and it completely ignoring the water supply issues and ignoring environmental concerns. So instead, what I think we do need to do is to have a local plan, which is what is happening at the moment, which objectively identifies, one, the housing waiting list for local people, our young people, our key workers, many of whom do not have the homes and are forced out of the area, and then also for the job growth, which is how to look at the job growth, which has increased. So it's about planning for that through consultation and constrained by our water and constrained by our environment. That's the kind of planning we want. What would I do to defend it? I've already challenged Michael Gove on it. I've already challenged our current sitting MP on this. We would not accept this development corporation. We would push for the local plan, the emerging local plan, to do this in a rigorous way, putting the right houses in the right places. Thank you.
Thank you, Dominic. It's a very, very important question. Much like everyone else who have heard so far, I think this Michael Gove plan is very, very misguided. It's not, as far as I'm aware, it's not Labour policy to continue that. I'm very much aware as well that every single local council in the area, including those that are Labour run, like the City of Cambridge, are also against this idea. If we're going to have houses, obviously we need more houses. I mean, as a young person, the chance of me buying a home in the area that I live in is extremely limited. You see a lot of people now having to go to bigger cities like London or something like Manchester and places like that to move out. Sometimes they want to stay near their families. They're being completely priced out on that. If we're going to build these local homes, though, they need to be done in conjunction with local peoples and local planning authorities and local councils. That's essential. We also need to be really well aware of the risks we have at the minute with our water crisis. We're very water dried area at the moment, and we need to make sure that any new houses that are built are very, very water efficient, and also have all the relevant environmental things, like solar panels, heat pump, things like that. Insulation is also a big problem on that. In terms of infrastructure, we have situations like up in Northstowe, where essentially you have the biggest new town since Milton Keynes, and they don't even have a co-op, let alone a doctor's surgery or anything else. We need to put in the contracts at the beginning of these developments that you have to build these amenities, you have to build these services before you build the houses. And if we can do that, we can hopefully start turning the tide, but we do need to build more houses, otherwise people like me are never going to be afford to live here.
So thank you very much for your question, and it's a very important one because I know the level of concern that those proposals have caused, quite rightly locally. So both Anthony and I have made representations to government. As you say, Michael Gove is no longer going to be in office of any kind after the election, and we put to him that the vision behind that strategy was not actually rooted in any sort of realistic reality in terms of what we could cope with here. So the water problem is by far and away one of the biggest when you come to assessing whether or not you could sustain house building on anything like that scale, even if it was desirable, which I don't believe it is. You'd be lucky if you got 9,000 additional homes on current water capacity before the Fenland reservoir is built, which is a decade-long project. So what we need, as some of the other candidates have said, is housing infill development in keeping with communities for key workers and families. We do not need mass housing developments of any kind in this area. We have already sustained the maximum amount in developments. I'm making terrible noise here. In Cambourne and surrounding areas. We can't take mass housing developments on top of that. Also to say, in terms of how the planning process works, it's absolutely right that those decisions are taken locally. The local plan, the emerging local plan, is of course controlled by our district council. So again, we need to have accountability on who is deciding where things are built. I've been a big advocate for Marshall's Airfield and Bourne Airfield. They are perfect brownfield sites. Let's not be taking out vast quantities of Tier 1 arable land for railways, busways and housing that nobody wants. It's wrong for our environment, wrong for the planet and wrong for local people.
Thank you.
So, much to Luke's point, I'm young and I've noticed the housing issue quite severely affects those who can't actually afford a house. So we do need more houses, but they can't be these big cast, copy and paste blocks of concrete houses that destroy the architectural integrity of Cambridgeshire. It needs to be a smart system and a planned system that allows these houses to be built in a more friendly manner to both the environment and the countryside.
Thank you, Marcy. Around there.
Thanks. It feels a bit like, we all say we need houses. The right home, right place, right price has been the Green Party's rallying call for well over a year. And Dominic, you're right. I too have noticed there have been lots of new houses put up, and it doesn't seem to have made any affordable. These young chaps are saying we need more houses to make them cheaper. Actually, there have been 30,000 new homes built around the city of Cambridge over a 10-year period to 2021, and everyone will notice that the prices haven't gone down. In fact, they have gone up. And I would say, well, that's not surprising because, well, as long as property and homes is seen as a market, then you build more of it and they're just going to get more expensive because that's how market economics works. So what the Green Party would do is really supercharge social housing. We need genuine social housing, not this pretend affordable housing which is simply 80% of market rates. And in terms of the water, I would go further than just saying we need new homes that are water efficient. I think we actually really need behaviour change, and that's why if I'm in government or if I'm in Parliament, I would be pushing at the top level nationally to try and get the Public Health Authority to do things like change their advice on hand washing, because people don't need to run the taps for those 20 seconds. They don't need to actually wash their hands in hot water, so you don't need to run it through. So you can use minimal water in your domestic life, and also everyone can please fix our dual flush loos, because we've all got them and nobody knows which button does what, and I don't think most of them plumb properly.
Thank you, Miranda. There's a dual flush loo in the minister's toilet. I don't understand which button is which. Right, who's for our fourth question? I'm going to come back to the front, and this young man in the blue t-shirt here, who has been hands up first every single time. So.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is David Smith. Have the pollsters decided the election result, and is it therefore not worth the effort of voting? Seriously though, do the pollsters influence the outcome to the detriment of democracy?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, we were extracting our feedback off you.
Sorry, can you hear me properly now?
Back up, please, John. We're just going to repeat the question, John.
Yes. Have the pollsters decided the election result, and is it therefore not worth the effort of voting? Seriously though, do the pollsters influence the outcome of the election to the detriment of democracy?
Okay, so you've got that? Good.
No. Since Rishi Sunak announced before telling his cabinet, or perhaps only just after telling his cabinet, that we'd have a snap election, since then I and my team have talked to more than 7,000 people on the doors across all villages in South Cambridgeshire. And so the answer is no. What I've seen really is one absolute despondency with the current government and people wondering what to do. More than ever before are people saying, before it would be, well, I've always voted this way, I voted this way, my parents voted this way, we always have. It's not that anymore. People are saying, how do I use this vote to change this government, mainly? And so they're looking then to sort of say, what choices do I have? How do I do it? And then that's where I thought you might go into a discussion around tactical voting, which is when the pollsters maybe come in, and some people may look to pollsters and to tactical voting sites. But actually, the real question here is, have we got the right voting system? Because if we had the right voting system, we had proportional representation, every vote would count to get the party that you want and the person that you want to present you, and that's what we would do with Liberal Democrats. And we would hold the probable incoming local government to fire on that one.
The answer is no. I try to ignore polling as much as I can. It's very easy to get sort of sucked into the whole polling thing, but you can't be complacent on anything. People have only just started voting the postal ballots, and obviously about 70 to 75% of people will vote on the day, which is next Thursday. So we shouldn't really be listening to them at all, we should be ignoring them. This is a very interesting constituency because it's changed quite rapidly since 2019. Not only are we in different political circumstances, but we're in a completely different boundary being redrawn. We will kind of have our own little beds of support. On a real piece of paper, it's a three-way margin, and that's what makes it very, very exciting. I've had some brilliant conversations all across this constituency and spoken to lots of different people, and actually there is a real voice there for the Labour Party, and there's a lot of people wanting that really inspiring change message. There are also a lot of undecideds. I've spoken to a lot of people, probably about half the people I talk to are genuinely undecided about what they're going to do on the day. A lot of people, very similar to the Mid-Bedfordshire by-election last year, when I was speaking to people who were going to literally decide how they were going to vote as they were walking to the polling station. That's how the way things can work. Anything can happen. And you know what happened in that election? The Labour Party ended up winning in that by-election. So these things are a bit volatile, but we're going to go out and do what we can to try and earn every single vote, and hopefully you'll be well responded to that.
Chris.
Well, thank you very much for your question. You would not be surprised to hear me say that I think that the polls, / I hope that the polls are very wrong. And one of the things that I have found on the thousands of doorsteps that I have visited, many of which are the same doorsteps that some of my opponents are visiting, and they're getting quite tired of the whole thing, is a general dissatisfaction with the way that this election is being presented to people here in this constituency. This idea that you must do something. Now, there are 6 candidates sat here in front of you, all giving you their visions for this community, their background, whether they grew up here like I did, whether they used our NHS here, whether they've got people at school here, so you understand who they are and where they come from, and then it's up to you to decide which of those 6 candidates you would like to represent you after the next election. Now, I've seen several stickers on doors saying no more political literature, which I quite understand, but this week, and I mentioned it at our last Hustings, I saw a new one saying no more Liberal Democrat bar charts, because people have had enough of this nonsense data that is put on there, which is, I think we had some sort of bizarre explanation earlier on the week, it's half a notional result and half a bit of the old seat. When you put it all together, we've won by a landslide. Well, no one is going to buy that. So it's up to you how you cast your vote, whether you think the rhetoric you're hearing matches up with the local records on things like the environment. I'm standing against those major development projects which I think would harm us. So you're in control, not the pollsters.
So the polls do look quite interesting, especially for us, I think. I think that we shouldn't pay too much attention to pollsters, but on the question of proportional representation, we do support proportional representation. It's a matter of that every vote should count, and that we shouldn't have this rhetoric going around that if you vote for X, you get Y. If you vote for Z, you get Y. It should be that every vote matters and that everyone's opinion counts.
To answer your question, do the pollsters influence the voting to the detriment of democracy? I would say yes, they do. There's a lot of psychology about it. There's a chap called Duverger who came up a few decades ago with something called Duverger's law, and he'd observed that in a first-past-the-post system, democracies tend to gravitate towards this two-party system. But there's nothing, that's because voters tend to, rational voters tend to choose between the two parties they think are most likely to win. So it's like, and that is what the parties who are well funded and can afford to keep littering your doormats with leaflets every other week take advantage of. They say it's between us and them, it's between us and them. It's not really. As you can see, there are 6 candidates here. We're all perfectly capable. It is a 6-horse race, but parties take advantage of that, trying to make you think it's us and them, and the polls just feed into that. There is a thing which has been going since 1975 and seems to be too little known. It's called short money. This is parliamentary funding for opposition parties. So all the parties who have at least one MP and a certain number of votes get an amount of money each year for every vote that was cast in the previous general election. So Caroline Lucas was an MP from 2010 until a few weeks ago, and about 85% of her parliamentary office was funded by votes that had been cast for Green Party members other than in Brighton.
Thank you, Miranda. James.
David, thanks for your question. Thanks for being so patient. The question was, have pollsters determined the outcome? And I think the answer to that is no. The second part of the question is it worth voting? The answer is yes. The reason why it is worth voting is really as outlined by Chris. It's very important that you put across wherever you think appropriate. The sad fact of the matter is that the election will almost certainly be won by one party, I won't name them, but the probability is that their share of the popular vote will be about 42% of those people who vote, which means more people will stay at home than vote for the winning party. This country hasn't been governed by a winning party that's had a majority of the popular vote since 1935. 1935. People crow when they say we have an overwhelming mandate of the people to do exactly what we want, but they're wrong. And the way that you're going to make a little bit of noise against that is to vote. Vote for any of the six of us, but vote.
I think that's everyone. Yes, I'm confusing myself now. Okay, don't forget there is water in the corner. You're all looking hot, and don't be shy. So, who's going to crack on with our question number 5? I haven't been over the back here, have I? So, it's as far away from Father Will as it possibly can be. So, I'm going to go to that back corner with the patterned shirt with pink and greeny colour. Yes?
Annabelle Sykes. I just note that when people were talking about infrastructure, nobody has talked about hospitals. We're waiting for 2 new ones and for a complete rebuilding of Addenbrooke's. But that's actually not what my question's about. I just note that. Doesn't seem to have happened under the new hospitals programme. My question is, what is the position of the candidates on the reopening of the Haverhill railway line? Which could be of considerable interest to Sawston, because you might actually get a station.
I'm going to rule that in order. So, Luke, what do you think about the Haverhill railway line?
I think it's a good idea. I've said before, Chris brought it up at the beginning, the whole C-set, busway, things like this. I think if we're going to have any sort of mass transport in this area, going all the way down to Haverhill is obviously a very, very good thing. There are a lot of workers there, also primarily blue-collar workers that do need to come up and work in this area. And, we've had a massive reduction in our railways over the coming years. I think one of the worst things we did in this country was in the 1950s with the beaching cuts. We got rid of so much of our good railways. And it was one of those things where it's like, the car's going to be so revolutionary. And it was, I'm a car driver, I love driving cars. But we don't really have the freedom to choose anymore what we want to do in terms of public transport. If you're in a rural area, you've pretty much got a car or currently an unreliable bus. So it is something that I want to look into, and it's something that I think I've had some conversations already with some people on the county council, and I've also spoken as well in quite detail with Cambridge Connects and some other people with that about ways that we can move forward with this. But it's definitely something I'm open to, and I would like to see some proposals move forward with that.
Thank you very much for your question, Annabelle. So I'm very supportive of reopening the Haverhill Railway, and I've actually called publicly for a feasibility study for light rail across Cambridge and its surrounding satellite towns and villages. I think any of you who have visited cities across the country, across Europe, and used a tram system or a light rail alternative will see what an excellent, cheap, energy-efficient, green model of transport they are. Sawston desperately needs a train station. What it does not need is a busway in completely the wrong place. Now, lots of you took part in a public consultation where 2/3 of people actually said, we don't want it down this route. And what they did is say, well, actually, that route won slightly in terms of the most votes cast, even though it was absolutely overwhelmingly opposed by the majority of people who actually took part in that consultation. So they're trying to force that busway on you that will cut through here, cut through the Gogmagogs, do huge environmental damage, and the on-road alternative to that would save £100 million worth of your money. So it wouldn't cause all the environmental damage, and it would go on a better route. But if you're going to have the Haverhill Railway, then you need to look at how the two projects work next to each other, and that's the problem. These projects are not talking to each other, and therefore we're having this level of confusion. So yes to light rail. We could probably abolish the Greater Cambridge Partnership while we're at it, and use some of that money to fund better transport policy and so forth.
So yes, we support the opening of the railway. Weirdly enough, we actually don't support HS2. We're going to scrap that £25 million project to bring more infrastructure to local towns, in top of improving the rail systems, which are very expensive to actually get on. I paid £25 for a one-way to King's Cross the other day, so that was not on. So we're also going to stop this war on cars as well. we're going to take 20p off the fuel duty, and we're going to scrap ULEZ and other congestion zones within the Cambridge Town Centre to make it easier to drive as well as easier to take rail.
Hi, yeah, addressing Annabelle's question directly, absolutely yes, I definitely support the reopening of the Haverhill line. And this fits in with the Green Party manifesto, which spells out that we want a national strategic approach to identifying those lines and stations which could be reopened, and that this should be led by regional and local governments to ensure the most benefits. And while I'm at the microphone, the Green Party manifesto also says we want to bring the railways back into public ownership because privatisation has failed. And the railways should be the backbone of a sustainable transport system. We want to invest in a modern, efficient, publicly owned railway with affordable fares, and we want greater investment in more rapid electrification. And on a local point, I would just say, as well as the Haverhill line reopening, which I know many people have campaigned for decades for, and it's regrettable that there seems to have been so much dithering about it in the local sort of authorities. But also, I'm very keen on the Snail Well Curve or Newmarket Loop, whatever you might call it, which would reconnect the Newmarket station up to Soham. Soham's been reopened, but it's so frustrating that you can't get straight from Newmarket to Soham. And also Cherry Hinton and Fulbourn. I've seen Network Rail Futures, whatever they call themselves, for 10 years have had that in their sites. Let's get on with that kind of thing for the railways.
Thank you for your question, Annabelle. I live in Shoe Camps. I have lived there for 22 years, so that is just outside Haverhill. I could get on at what used to be called Shoey Hall, so I'm all in favour. As Miranda says, it has to be electrified there, not diesel, as east-west is.
Thank you, James. Goodbye.
It's wonderful, isn't it, when we all agree? So, so we can have cross-party agreement on things. So I'd be very open to this, Annabelle, thank you for your question about the reopening. But anybody who says that these things are simple, I just don't think they're being honest. So we know that we need huge finance and a whole new project to sort of develop that through. I've also talked to and been at the presentations by Rail Future East England and by Cambridge Connect. And so we would absolutely need to know that the funding is there to take that all the way through to Haverhill, which I agree, as with Luke, that we've got plenty of people who need to travel that way. What was very interesting in that presentation, well, is that the light rail to Haverhill would be dependent on being part of Network Rail, the heavy rail system, to deal with capacity. So it would be dependent on East-West Rail, which some of the people around here aren't actually in agreement with. So you're shaking your head, because this is my point as well. I would, as your MP, I'd get a big map, and I'd look at it and say, let's all sit around this, all the people who are responsible for transport, who are not talking to each other, and work out what we need around here between light rail, heavy rail, busways, buses, whatever we need, so that we've actually got a joined up strategy for our area.
Thank you. Right, so we're crashing on to question number 6. Where I am, I haven't been over in this back corner, have I? So, what's that? The peachy looking shirt at the back there, is that a fair description? Yes? Right at the back.
Hello everyone, my name is Gabriel, I'm 19 years old. This will be my first time voting in a general election. So speaking on behalf of young people, how are you planning to help us manage the rising cost of living and ensuring we can afford basic necessities? I hope we will vote.
Chris? Well, Gabriel, thank you for your question and congratulations on hopefully casting your first ballot. Remember your ID, or you won't. You need that now. What would we do specifically for you and your group? So you're probably aware of the apprenticeship scheme. We've delivered over 2.6 million apprenticeships since we've been in government. We are pledging to build an additional 100,000 of these places, and I've met lots and lots of people, both on the side of the apprentice but also on the employer side, who found that as an excellent way through into a career and a paid job and a career that they want to follow. And I think, I look back at when I was at school and we were sort of guided down specific routes. I slightly rebelled, but a lot of people were told, you should go and do that. It's all about what you want to do and how you want to fulfill your dreams and ambitions, and I think that the apprenticeship scheme is an excellent way of doing that. It's also making sure that you can buy a house, and a lot of us have talked about that here, and that's why we're reintroducing the Help to Buy scheme that was quite successful, and actually taking stamp duty away from first-time buyer purchases, so just making it that little bit easier for you to get onto the property ladder, and then building houses locally. I don't think anyone up here is actually saying don't build houses, and I think we need to be really clear on that. That's a very dangerous line of thought, but what we're saying is, where can we build houses for you that will support your job ambitions, where you want to bring up your family, and that you can stay near your family, like my family here in this village. And that's what I would like to do as your MP, and thanks for your question.
So one of Reform's main ideas is good pay for good work, which is we're going to bring the tax-free allowance up to £20,000, which means it's going to be more money in your pocket at the end of the day. That helps kind of the lower strata of work and helps people get into a more competitive salary. In terms of, we're planning to bring down energy prices as well as cutting tuition fees for STEM subjects and reducing that 7.2% interest rate on those fees, which is absolutely crippling. But on top of university, that's not the only route that young people tend to go by. We're going to encourage more trade jobs and bring back a lot of manufacturing sectors up to local areas to provide kind of more job opportunities for those that aren't inclined to go spend 4 years in academics. Thank you.
Thank you, Harrison. Veronica?
Hi Gabriel, you didn't say, but I'm assuming you're at the age of 19, you're either already at or thinking of going to university. Well, the Green Party will be making higher education back to being free. We'll get rid of the tuition fees and restore the maintenance grant. And as well as that, as I've mentioned earlier, we will be investing in social housing, because it's social housing we need, rather than keep building new houses that just increase profits for property developers. The Green Party recognises that we don't actually have really a cost of living crisis. What we have is an inequality crisis, and so we're all about actually let's get some of that money. There's plenty of wealth in the country, but it's in the hands of too few people. So that's why we want to restore the balance by taxing the wealthy and restoring our public services, which will help everyone, including yourselves.
Thank you, Veronica. James?
Gabriel, thanks for your question. Once again, I don't have any magic dust to sprinkle. I rather fear that you're going to be working till you're 70. I expect that the pension age will be up to 70 by the time you get there to pay for old codgers like me. Remember, is absolutely right, but we do not raise taxes in a very sensible and fair way. We ought to lift the burden on people at the lower end to give them more of a chance, and that probably is going to include people who are younger. I think in terms of the way we deal with people as they leave school, we probably got that wrong. We really need to look at that again. We probably push too many people into university when they don't necessarily get the most benefit out of it, and they want to get some other part towards training. But generally speaking, we've just got to work a bit smarter.
Thank you, James.
Thanks, Gabriel, for that question. And we know, all of us, that Cambridge is one of the most unequal cities, don't we, in the country. But in the census, we also saw that in South Cambridgeshire, the number of young school leavers at age 16 that are not in education, employment or training is really, really high. In fact, we're really down in the rungs of equality of those kind of variables. That means there are young people leaving school here in South Cambridgeshire with these amazing job opportunities for others for the time that don't see the Greater Cambridge area as part of their future. So I've been asking companies now, I've been saying, tell me how many percentage of your company is graduate and non-graduate, and how many are coming for local colleges. So as well as bringing in the best of the best, we also have to make sure that we've got routes way through to amazing jobs here. Secondly, we would make sure the maintenance grant is reinstated. We would look at mortgage protection fund and rental protection, especially for people who are renting. But the social housing, what does it mean basically? Affordable housing is 80% of market rate, which around here is just completely unaffordable. Social housing, what does it mean? It means about a third of income. That's what social housing rates are, whether for purchase or rent. We get rid of right to buy, but finally, what we would do, which neither Labour nor the Conservatives do, is we would accept the European Union's offer that for under 35-year-olds you can live, work, study, travel for up to 4 years in the EU bloc.
Yeah, it's an extremely important question, and thank you for it, Gabriel. We do have a lot of issues in this area, especially when it comes to things like skills and skills training. We haven't really had a skills strategy for a very, very long time. It makes it very difficult for people to get good paying jobs and good work. We want to increase the number of apprenticeships. We want to make sure that we're getting those skills up. And in new and emerging jobs as well. Labour have a plan, for example, you may have heard about it, the GP Energy proposal for a new publicly owned energy company. Investing in, we can create up to 600,000 new jobs in renewable energy, solar, wind, tidal, nuclear. These are very, very important things that we can be driving towards, and it will get more people, more money in people's pockets. I also want to talk a little bit about housing. We've obviously discussed that already. My time already. I've also discussed about housing. Council housing as well is extremely important. The Labour Party has promised to build 1.5 million homes, and we need to do that because we need to make sure that young people get on the housing ladder. Renting is also important. I'm a renter. I've rented in my village of Fulbourn for the past 5 years. Rents are spiralling out of control, and there are also situations where people get forcibly evicted from their rental accommodation for no apparent reason until we get rid of Section 21 to allow that not to happen. I also want to talk briefly about transport. I spoke earlier about Tiger Pass and things like that. It's a lot of money you can spend on transport in order to get around to do your day job, and it increases on your burden on the cost of living. The Tiger Pass is a very good example of that. You can bring down your bill on your transport for for buses because you're only paying £1 for it. And we also want public ownership of railways to bring those prices down too.
I think Terry's broken his bell. Terry's getting overexcited with the bell. We're doing well, it's hot. There is water in the back, so don't forget. Some of you look as if you're about to faint. Please don't. Please don't. So we're zipping on to question number 7. We're doing really well. So which area am I going to go? I haven't been to the deep back, and I think the most backest person with their hand up is in the black T-shirt. The smart young man who's just stood up there.
Hi, my name's Tom. My question is on climate change, specifically related to a certain type of policy. If you have no thoughts on it at all, that's a shame, but just answer about climate change in general. Specifically, what are your thoughts on a carbon fee and dividend policy, which, for anyone who's unaware, is a tax on fossil fuels when they're sold, with the price rising over time and all of that revenue being distributed evenly to all of the citizens of the country as a dividend?
Okay, did you get that, candidates? Yep. Okay, I'm going to ask Harrison to go first.
So, climate change is very important, and I feel that we're a bit misguided in our attempts to fix it and solve it. A good example of that is our steel production and manufacturing capability has been shipped to India. So we can make all our steel in India, get it shipped over here, and then we can claim that we're all green because the carbon didn't come from us. So I look at a lot of the policies that are presented to us, and they're not serious proposals. Things like nuclear power have not been explored properly in the country. France is 90% nuclear, and they sell us their energy. So what we need to do is look at more physical climate policies, more than vanity projects that are taking money out of your pocket, taking money out of the system, and not benefiting anyone in exchange.
Thank you, Harrison. Miranda.
Hi, thanks for the question. Well, I'm standing for the Green Party. I've joined the Green Party because the Green Party, as I said, puts climate action and social justice at the heart of all policies, and we believe you can't just tack it on to other business as usual policies, but it is at the heart of everything, because otherwise, frankly, we're all going to hell in a handcart. So I've got the statistical appendix to the manifesto here, and yes, carbon taxes are in the bottom line, rising to, by 2030, £91 billion income. That is going up very slowly, obviously the Green Party will be introducing that, and we think that's completely necessary, and it helps naturally to bring the carbon usage down.
James.
Thanks for your question, Tom. Did you say it was called the carbon fee dividend?
Fee and dividend.
Fee and dividend. Well, we already raised taxes on petroleum. When you fill your car with petrol, if you're lucky enough to own a car, of the £1.42 that you pay per litre, about £1.20 is tax. I would like to see taxes on hydrocarbons go up. I think it's something whereby people in this room would be happier to see hydrocarbon taxes go up than income tax or national insurance. So I think that would be a very good idea. I think you get into quite a dangerous area if you tax and hypothecate the proceeds and just say, well, we've raised this much, therefore it's £1,000 each. I think if you get into hypothecated taxes, people then really do realise how much tax they pay and how little they get back in return. But the fundamental that you're asking is, should taxes on hydrocarbons be higher in order to fight climate change? The answer is yes.
Thank you very much for that question. I'm passionate about climate change. It's one of the reasons I'm standing for Parliament. I've been privileged to work for quite a few years now and on climate and environment issues. I've been working with governments at each of the COP summits, the Global Climate Summits, since 2010. And I've worked with the EU negotiating team as well on what they're doing around climate. So, of course, one of the greatest problems that we've had was coming out of the European Union and being able to tackle global issues like climate change together with our partners. But if we're talking about taxes, let's look at the windfall tax. The Liberal Democrats were the first to say, let's put that windfall tax on the energy companies, on oil and gas. And the Conservatives did take that and said, yes, we've put a windfall tax, but did you know that it had an exemption? So you could get 80% off that windfall tax if you invested in new oil and gas in the North Sea. So not much money came on that and lots more investment in oil and gas. What we would do as Lib Dems, we would actually accelerate to 2045, the reaching of net zero. We would get renewals to 90% by 2030. But the most important would be our emergency home upgrade, which would be a 10-year programme to insulate our homes, and it would be held for those who are on low incomes, because that's what we've got to make sure that the social inequalities, those who can't afford it, can actually be part of this just transition to net zero. Thank you.
Yes, climate change is an existential crisis, and we also have to acknowledge that we can't do this alone. We are a very small island, and we can only do so much locally. We have to work, of course, with our allies and sometimes our adversaries as well to make sure that we are protecting the planet. There are some things we can do locally. You mentioned this specific task. Obviously, I've read the May manifesto. It's 144 pages. I don't want to make a policy on the hoof. I don't think that's a very specific policy we have in there, but don't put me on that specifically. What we can do, similar to echo what Pippa said, we can abolish, we can put a proper windfall tax on the oil and gas companies. What we want to do is that's how we would kickstart the money for GB Energy, that publicly owned energy company. It's very strange to me that we pay our energy bills here. Basically, they go and fund schools in France because EDF and companies like that are owned wholly by the French state. We should be reinvesting that money here, getting good paying jobs, removing the Tories' ban on onshore wind. Things like this are very, very important to get our energy, to hopefully become energy independent. That's what we want to see. The Labour Party has an ambition to become carbon neutral in our electricity grid by 2030. I think we can do that, but it requires investment, it requires ambition, and it requires us to really move forward on these projects. It's actually, quite funnily enough, in 2010, I remember Nick Clegg turned around and said, oh, there's no point in building all these new nuclear power stations because they won't come online until 2020. And now we're here in 2024 and it's like, well, actually, we could have done with those. So we need to be doing long-term strategic planning in this area, bring down the carbon bill, but also help other people through the cost of living crisis and get those good paying jobs. I believe we can do that, and that's the Labour Party policy.
Well, thank you for your question, and it's an extremely important one. And those of us that have been out over the last weeks and months have experienced quite extreme variances of weather that are, frankly, not normal, and these are becoming ever more commonplace. The evidence is right there for us to see it. What are we doing about it? So I'm proud of this government's record on decarbonisation. If you look at the global league tables, we are one of the leading countries, certainly within Europe, most certainly in the world, where we have got some very serious examples of countries who purport to be very environmental, but are building multiple new power stations every week that are coal-powered. There should be no place for those whatsoever. But it is striking that balance. Now, we have all seen our energy bills go up very, very dramatically due to the Russian invasion in Ukraine. The only way to safeguard against that is to make sure that we are energy sufficient. Taking out huge swathes of local land for power generation is not the way to achieve that. If you look at Bolsham, for example, where they're planning to build the largest solar farm in the UK, it takes out huge amounts of Tier 1 arable land, and actually West Ratting, which is a parish there, 50% of it would become solar panels. The community are very, very concerned about the future for them and indeed their families. So yes, we need to be a leader in green energy. We are in offshore wind. We're exporting our technologies globally. They're huge employers. The green industry is good for British business and good for our planet. It's about striking the right balance and not, as one of my opponent's leaders recently said, appeasing Vladimir Putin. That's not the way to go.
Thank you, Chris. So we're on to something question. So where haven't I been recently? I'm really struck by this yellow shirt here at front with the dangly glasses. He's going to put them on.
Thank you, yes. I'm Neil. What are the candidates' parties planning to do about restructuring the second chamber, the House of Lords?
I don't think we've been there yet. Restructuring the House of Lords. Miranda. You're turning to your restructuring the House of Lords page.
Replacing the House of Lords with an elected second chamber. That's in our manifesto. I'll leave it at that.
James.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name? Neil. Thanks for the question, Neil. No, I'd like to see the House of Lords radically overhauled. Firstly, I'd moved out of London. Secondly, I would reduce the numbers. Thirdly, I would ask those who are political appointees to leave. And fourthly, I would like to see mass organisations like the National Trust and or sports clubs be entitled to nominate people to that second chamber. So I think you'd end up with about 400 people in what I'd rename the House of Peers, located somewhere outside London.
It's always been Lib Dem policy to reform the House of Lords, and even at times to actually get rid of the House of Lords. What has actually happened recently, I think in the last 2 years, is what we've seen is the House of Lords and Select Committees are the only two places that have been bastions of scrutiny of this government, and so we've actually had a re-look at this, that at the moment, we're glad that it was there. We wouldn't go for an elected chamber because that's just like having two elected chambers, one on top of the other. So we're not in favour of that. We're not sure how we'd review it, but it does need reforming. But by God, if we didn't have it at the moment, we'd be in a very difficult place and a dark place.
I go against my party a bit sometimes on this one because I'm actually quite a big fan of the House of Lords. I think, similar to the views that Pippa said, I think it does some very, very good work. Actually, a lot of the scrutiny that does come from the government, and it does come from the House of Lords, and I think that we need to be able to protect that and keep that. There are reforms that need to be done, though, very much so. And one of the big things is the overinflation. There's about 800 or 700 members in the House of Lords. The only other chamber in the world that has more members is in Communist China, the party there. So it's crazy that we have that. We need to reduce the numbers. The Labour policy is that when you are 80 in the House of Lords, that you have to retire. We bring those numbers down immediately, and then we can start thinking about how we want to reappoint people to that chamber, because it needs to be done in a different way. These prime ministerial appointments we're seeing right now, for example, you have lots of problems where Russian oligarchs are coming in. It's a complete mess. So we have to see reform in that area. I don't think an elected second chamber is a very good idea at all. We see what happens in many countries. We have two elected chambers. America comes to my head immediately. You have two chambers with individual mandates on different voting systems on how to make things work. They never get anything done because they always disagree. I think having a scrutinising chamber that can check the government of the day is a fantastic thing, and I would seek to protect it.
So Luke and I are, I think we're forming a coalition here, because I agree with Luke's point. We don't want a second elected chamber. The primacy of the House of Commons is predicated on there not being a second elected chamber. You have expertise from multiple walks of life. They do scrutinise, that lady does not agree, they do scrutinise the work that takes place in the House of Commons in an extremely important way, and actually often not to the benefit of my party, but that is democracy. That is what they are there to do, is to hold lawmakers to account, to add expert opinion and testimony, and to help shape legislation. The cost of the alternative proposals that some of the parties are putting forward are huge, and I think at the moment that is not a good use of taxpayers' money to be paying people huge salaries to sit in the second chamber. In terms of the Labour policy, though, of cutting people off at the age of 80, those of you will know, of course, former Speaker of the House, Betty Boothroyd, one of our more famous political residents who lived in the village of Triplo, was 94 when she passed away and finished her career. And if you're saying that she had nothing to contribute over those last 14 years, I think you've got it very wrong. It's another Labour policy that's a great soundbite, but in reality it doesn't really work.
So we don't plan on making any changes to the House of Lords. I do have a square metre plot of land in Scotland. I think I might put a fence around it someday. So by technicality I am a Lord, but it's not in our policy to change the current House of Lords. Thanks.
Not now we're in such esteemed company. Okay, we are doing really well, so we're cracking through these questions. Where haven't I been lately? And then come back over to the young gentleman in this, I don't know what shade of that is, but you see who I mean, yes.
Thank you. We've heard a lot about planning and making it local, but it seems that every few years we're inventing a new body to represent local people in planning. Is it time we actually reform local government so that the people voted in this summer can actually do what they want and get things done on a popular mandate?
Thank you. So we've done reforming the House of Lords, now it's reforming local government. James.
Sorry, I didn't catch your name. What's your name? Sasha, thanks for the question. I just don't know the answer. I mean, if you're saying that we have a general election and elect politicians, but then we should rejig the district council because they're in charge of planning, I don't know is the answer.
That's an honest answer.
Yanni, you put your finger in really sort of on the jugular vein here. Everybody would say that it's really complex, that really is hard for people to know, which different level of authority does what, and some seem to be overlapping. And so we've had the, mayoralty on top of, and we would actually say that it's not really designed very well, combined authority on top of the county and district councils. And then on top of that, then we suddenly get a Cambridge Growth Company, and then on top of that, that creates a development corporation on top of that, which takes away, the powers from within those as well. So absolutely, we do need some form of simplification here. In terms of Lib Dems, what do we believe in passionately? We are the most centralised country in Europe apart from Belarus. Lib Dems believe in bringing power down to the local levels and to making sure that there is real strength in the power of that voice. So we would do that. We're looking at regional governance, because that's where land actually makes sense and where planning makes sense. And we would come up with a land use framework where we look at all the different types of land and say, actually, how should they all be contributing and making the best to a thriving, green and prosperous future for all.
Thank you very much. Luke?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I actually, when I was applying for some jobs last year, I was in a situation where I had to do a presentation, and because I'm a bore, I decided to do it on local government and the structures in Cambridgeshire, and it educated them on how many layers we actually have and how ridiculous it is how many people we actually need to elect. It does need reform. The problem with reform is, one, it's expensive, it costs a lot of money to change these things around, and two, you have to do it through primary legislation in Parliament. You can't just do it locally, it has to go through an Act of Parliament to change these things. I do think it's worth looking at. I've heard there's some ideas obviously with unitary authorities. Where I was born originally was in South Gloucestershire, and we have a unitary authority there, and it works pretty well. I think because of the layers we have, merging some of those could work, but again, the devil in that comes to the details, what's the boundaries, how are you going to make it work. But devolution has looked to being quite a success. The Labour Party wants to expand devolution. We want to make sure that elected mayors have those powers to do things. We've seen up in Manchester, for example, with Andy Burnham, who's done very, very good jobs, being an elected Labour mayor, pushing forward on things like bus franchising, pushing things forward on housing and all these things. They can do some really good jobs, and Nick Johnson's hopefully pushing forward onto a lot of those things as well. And with the Labour government behind him, I think we can really achieve some things in that area. So I think it's definitely worth looking at, and as your MP, is something that I would want to explore. But I also do think that devolution is a very, very important thing.
Thank you, Luke. Chris?
Well, Sasha, thank you very much for your question. There are far too many layers of government in this area, and during the congestion charge debate, those of you who will remember it, where the Liberal Democrats and Labour were trying to charge you £5 every single time you got in your car, a lot of you said, we're not actually very keen on that idea, can we not have that please? We don't think it actually improves the environment, improves local transport, or makes our lives any easier. And I worked with a lot of residents' groups as part of that campaign, and they said, we're really struggling to understand who we're supposed to lobby and who's actually making this decision, and who appointed those politicians in the Greater Cambridge Partnership who are going to take this decision against the will of local people, who are saying, well, you know, if you lived in Bristol you could have a referendum, but not here, we think we know best. So yes, a unitary authority is a very worthy area for exploration. It would actually save, after implementation, quite huge sums of money, because at the moment, and this group that I was working with on the congestion charge said, could you explain the various tiers of government? I said, I could try. You've obviously got your parish, you've got your district, you've got county, you've got the mayor, you've got the GCP, you've got your member of parliament, all competing, not a very clear decision-making process, and more does not equal better when it comes to local government.
Thank you, Chris.
So yes, I do support reform. I'm not going to be a comedian my other life. So yes, so what reforms I'm going to do is we're looking to cut waste, and that's a lot of our policies looking at kind of bringing these large bureaucratic messes and cutting them down to the bare bones that's needed, mainly for fast-tracking planning that saves us all time and money.
Thank you, Vincent. Miranda.
Thanks, Sasha. Yeah, I mean, most areas have parish, district, county, unless they have unitaries. Then we have these extra layers of the GCP and the mayoral team. So we've got probably the most complex local government of any part of the country, I think. We wonder how we got there, how we got here. I have heard the rather cynical view that in about 2014, because Cambridge itself was controlled by either, the city council was controlled by either Liberals or Liberal Democrats or Labour, and the rest of it around the outside was all Conservative controlled then, that the Conservative government decided to introduce the city deal, which then became GCP, in order to get some Conservative influence into the city. And then that was all right until 2018, when the Liberal Democrats kindly took over the district council for us. So, and then later took over the county council. So, oh dear, how do we deal with that? I know, in 2017, let's create a mayoralty so that we can get a Conservative mayor, and that worked okay for 4 years, but now we've ended up with a Labour mayor, so it's just not working for the Conservatives, sadly. But you're absolutely right. Just in terms of the district council and the county council, I often think that wouldn't it be so much better if the people who aren't sweeping up the gutters, the detritus from the gutters, were the same people who weren't weed killing the stuff and weren't clearing out the drains? In other words, you know, these two different authorities is not helping anybody. And as someone else said to me, it just multiplies the places through which the cracks, you know, through which things can fall. So we certainly do need, I think, a bit of tidying up of our local government here.
Thank you, Miranda. Looking at my watch, I think we might be looking at maybe 2 more questions, but it just depends how quickly the answers are. So the end is in sight. The end is in sight. So where am I going to? I'm going to go back to the back, and I can see right at the back a blue blouse or jacket or shirt or something. Right in the back corner, just to give Will something to do.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Deborah Roberts, and I've got a question. But I'll quickly say, for centuries, actually, women have been fighting for our rights. They fought to get a vote, they fought to get an equal pay, they fought to stop home abuse, husbands being able to beat their wives. And all these things have been very important, and they've been hard, very hard earned. All of you sitting up there tonight have a mother, or have had a mother. Can you tell me what you would do to protect women's rights, and how would you identify what a woman is?
Thank you, Pippa. You may have been expecting this one, I don't know. Pippa, we'll start with you.
Thank you very much for the question. There's 2 parts to that, how to protect women's rights, and I would thank you, Deborah, for that question. And I have done work on this earlier in my life. And I really do wish that we spent more time on this, because actually the most dangerous place for a woman right now is in her home. It's on the streets. And I worry for my daughter, being in London, it's on the streets. It's about violence against women by men. What would Liberal Democrats do? We would make misogyny a hate crime. We have to tackle this out. There are too many incidents of domestic abuse happening in places where women feel they should be safest, women and girls. In terms of, how do people identify? Well, I'm very proud to be part of a party that defends and protects the rights to people of all sexual orientation and of all genders, including trans and non-binary. We would ban conversion therapy for all as an absolutely horrific practice, and we would make no changes, no rowing back to the Equality Act that already provides exceptions if any sector, schooling, health, prisons, feel that there is a need to protect anyone vulnerable, particularly somebody who's been a victim of violence, that can be a single-sex space as an exception. We have no need to change the Equality Act. Oh, you're hitting me.
Yeah, like Pippa said, this question is split into two parts. The first, protecting women. Violence against women and girls is a massive, massive problem. We're seeing large increases in things like rape, things like that, and these things are not being tried or convicted in court at all. We have an under 2% conviction rating at the moment for cases of rape. Now, the Labour Party wants to make sure that in those cases we're going to have dedicated rape courts, over 90 of them, to make sure that we get that backlog down and make sure that people pay for their crimes. On top of that, we want to ensure that when dealing with things like identity, it's obviously a situation at the moment that has unfortunately become quite toxic. It's a debate that is, I have a lot of trans friends myself. It makes them very much feel uncomfortable with themselves, it makes them uncomfortable in their skin, walking around, they feel very, very judged. Now, we talk about how to define things, In 2004, the Labour Party passed the Gender Recognition Act, and we passed that 20 years ago, and it means that people could, for the very first time, legally change their gender based on having and obtaining a gender recognition certificate. And that's right, people, if we're going to acknowledge that gender dysphoria exists and is a thing, we must have a process to make people go through that. And I think it's very, very important that it continue. We're not going to change the Equality Act, another landmark piece of legislation by the Labour government. I'm very proud of what we've achieved in the past, and we must respect everyone from any walks of life, no matter who they are, and trans people need to be included in that.
So some excellent points made both there by Pippa and Luke, and I hope that you're going to have agreement across the panel on this issue, because we talked about this on Monday, and I said there, and I believe this, people talk about the trans debate. Well, it's not a debate. Trans people exist, they deserve respect and dignity. What we're talking about is how we implement the law in a way that is fair to all groups. That's what we should be trying to do, not having this toxic discussion, which is what I'm afraid it often becomes. I hope it won't become that tonight, I don't think it will, but I've been in a lot of rooms where that is naturally where that discussion progresses. We are all trying to provide a safe framework for people, however they identify, however they choose to love, however they choose to live, to be protected. That is the key here. I think the work that Pippa has done in relation to misogyny is highly commendable. I would like to see the prosecution service increasing its success rate when it comes to prosecuting these crimes. We see far too many fall by the wayside before they reach court. That's completely unfair on the victims. So as your MP, I would fight to make sure that the prosecution service is taking attacks on women in whatever form they appear seriously.
Rightly so, a lot of women don't feel safe outside. I don't feel safe outside in some areas of London. I'm 6'5", 120 kilos, so it's a real issue that needs to be tackled. We're looking at bringing in 40,000 new police officers and zero tolerance to crime against women. That means sexual assaults, rapes, that sort of violence is going to be heavily prosecuted, and it will see massive increases in prison sentences and terms for those crimes. In terms of women's rights, what women are entitled to is a safe space, and for us what that means is a mandated single-sex space in toilets and bathrooms. Everyone deserves respect, everyone deserves love, but some people need to have a space to feel safe, and I don't think that's being respected in a lot of areas right now. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Miranda.
Hi, Deborah. Thank you for being that person who brought that question to this hustings. Of course, we want to protect women's rights, trans rights, humans' rights. You know, we are all humans. We are all on this planet together, and of course, we are all at one with nature as well. We shouldn't separate ourselves from that. I noticed in the prayer earlier that apparently the Parliament only pray for humankind. Well, the Green Party, I think, would be more interested in the whole nature, because the dualism is where we've got into this mess. In terms of safe spaces and bathrooms, I think the best solution to this I've seen is a friend of mine took me into King's College, where in the bar there they have labelled their doors cubicles and urinals. Isn't that a sensible solution? Just label the equipment and then everyone can use the one they feel comfortable at. And in terms of this question of what is a woman, I don't know why you feel you need to ask that question, but you know, I was wondering to myself, I don't know, is it a woman? Am I a woman? Because I'm wondering whether it's okay not to wear high heels when I'm sure the chaps on this stage haven't given a thought to whether they should wear high heels or not. You know, we are all humans, we're all in this together, and if we don't sort ourselves out and tackle climate change, then it won't matter whether we're women, men or trans, because, you know, there ain't no sexes on a dead planet.
Deborah, thanks for that question. Yes, I have an 88-year-old mother and a 25-year-old daughter. As people probably realise, women make up just over half of the population, and they should be treated equally with men in all spheres, for all purposes. People have highlighted the violence perpetrated on women, which is very accurate. The real problem is that violence is perpetrated by men. It's men on men as well as men on women. We have to educate men to behave in a little bit more sensible way. That's the best way to protect women's rights. Your question about what is a woman, I'm with J.K. Rowling.
Thank you, James. Some of you may need to go and look that up if you haven't followed the debate. Right, so we're doing well. It's only 2:15. Night is yet young. So. All finished before the bell. So I'm gonna go green top, as you've had your hand up 100 times. Yes, green top in the middle of this right-hand side here.
Thank you. My name's Flo, and I'm probably a bit annoying to any political party because I'm a bit of a swing voter. I've been really impressed by lots of things that I've heard in terms of policy. I've heard several people say things have to be done better or spent more wisely. I guess what I'm really looking for in my MP is somebody who is responsive and who has personal integrity. So what do you base your ethics on? What makes something a matter of integrity for you?
Thank you. What do you base your ethics on, and how do you judge whether it's a matter of integrity?
It's a great question, and thank you for it, Flo. It's obviously a very, very, very personal and big thing, but obviously the thing with integrity is very, very important. I think we've seen over the past 4 years especially, we've seen a lot of members of Parliament and people in those spheres not really set the best example for what we need to be doing as members of Parliament, and I think it's a real shame, and we need to see that turn around, and we need to elect people, I think, who are going to show that integrity, show that trust. You know, at the end of the day, we are beholden to you, you vote us in, and we have to make sure that's going. You know, I'm not a person who wants to lie, I'm not a person who wants to tell you a mistruth on any sort of policy or directions or any of my own values. You know, I had an upbringing that was very much focused on that. I owe a lot of it to my parents and the way that they brought me in. In terms of my actual ethics and the way that I see the world, you know, I am somebody who goes to church on a basis, and I don't necessarily do it because I'm a religious person. I do it because for me it's very much the values of community and the values of and the values that you can get from that I find very, very reasonable, and it's something that's helped me on a personal basis, but I do think, for me, seeing those things and acting on those things would make it a much better job if I do become your MP, because I'll be able to actually get down and be honest with you, get involved in the community. You know, I want to make sure I have my office in the community, I want to make sure I'm approachable, respectable, people can come and talk to me if there's any problems, prod my chest on the street if they have any issues. These things are very, very important, but trust in politics is way down, and not all parties are the same.
Thank you, Chris.
Well, thank you for such an excellent question, and I would suggest that it should be asked of every candidate at every hustings up and down this country, because why we are here standing in front of you asking for your vote tonight is absolutely critical to how you then go and make your decision in the ballot box when you cast that very important vote, because you're putting your trust in us to represent you, to represent your views, to represent the collective views of the people in this community. And actually what is so difficult on the doorstep is where people say, well, you're all the same. You're all just politicians. You're all just doing it for yourselves. You know, you're not actually interested in our community, and you only come round at election time. Is something I think we probably all hear. But I know quite a few of us actually go round all year round, and I have been doing that for the past 3 years. So sometimes it's good to point out, well, I was on your doorstep 6 months ago. But anyway, people feel at the moment extremely angry about accountability. In terms of my moral code, I think the Nolan principles in public life are absolutely vital, around integrity, around honesty, in terms of how you are behaving, how you're making decisions. Are you being free and fair? Are you declaring an interest? Are you stating anyone who's spoken to you before you cast your vote? Are you doing it solely for the people in your community? That's why I'm standing to be your MP, to represent my home, to represent where I grew up, and to put the people of this community first. Thank you for the question.
So I want to start by saying that all the candidates here are incredibly respectful people. I have utmost respect for them, and I think they're all wonderful and will do a great job in terms of their integrity and commitment to the role. I'm going to open what I see with my views on terms of integrity with a bit of plagiarism, just to start, because why not? So the views that I stand by are courage, discipline, respect, integrity, and lawfulness. That is actually stolen from the army. But that's what I operate my moral code on, and that is what I base everything and my actions on to do. Thanks.
Thank you, Mason. Miranda.
Yes, hello, thanks for that brilliant question. And actually, we love a swing voter because we always think we can get you to sort of vote for us. I grew up, sadly my parents aren't around anymore, but if they were, they would tell you that growing up, it was evident that I had just an innate sense of fairness and sort of quest for truth. I couldn't, I despised dishonesty growing up. Now, through my education, was basically science-based. I did a science degree, so I'm very much evidence-based. I like to look stuff up. Sometimes in jobs, my colleagues have been frustrated because rather than taking away work, I'll kind of go off and scurry off and say, are you sure, is this right? But I do love a fact check. Friends of mine on Facebook make the mistake of posting memes. I say, actually that's not true, I've looked it up and this is where that quote really came from. I worked in the NHS for 10 years. I remember telling my last boss there when I was leaving the NHS, I said, look, I don't do this for the money, I'm doing it because I want to make the system better. That's why I was a manager in the NHS. And that's why I'm standing here. I'm not doing this because I want the salary of MP. I'm doing this because someone's got to do the job, and I think that I can do a good job, and I want to be able to help us all. That's it.
Flo, thanks for your question. What is personal integrity? Personal integrity is doing the right thing when you think no one's watching and you'll never get caught out. What's doing the right thing? I tend to find that I visualise how my mother, 88-year-old mother, would react if I explained what I was doing. If she says, that sounds okay, then it's okay. If she says, do you think that's awfully wise, then it's not. That's my mantra.
Thank you. There's two parts to answer in terms of what it is in me that I think drives me and informs all of my values. I think the first thing, it's quite similar there. I think every decision you'd say, is that right? Is it fair? Is anyone left behind? Those are the three things that I would always be saying. And then I would say, would I be able to go home and look myself in the mirror? Would I be able to look my mum in the mirror, my husband, my daughter, my son, my neighbours and those who voted for me? So that would be in terms of the thing that would be through me and through me in terms of when I'm making a decision. The second part of it, which is why I've worked on environmental issues all my life, is that it's indivisible. I had the privilege to work with Amazonian tribes for quite a few years. They understand how there is no, you cannot plan if you're not planning for nature and the future of nature as well for yourself, and you're thinking about your place in the world of nature, and there is reciprocity there. And so to me, it's all about that balance. And often I think kind of perhaps the humanists look at that, they talk about that much more openly, but it really is about having that balance and responsibility because it nurtures us so much and gives us so much. Thank you.
I think that is an absolutely fantastic question to finish on, and it is ticking towards 9 o'clock. So we are going to ask our candidates to now sum up their entire lives and strategy and policies and why you should vote for them in 1 minute. And because for our opening statements we went this way, for our closing statements we're going to go this way. So Luke's going to go first, and Chris is going to finish, and then perhaps tick over just to say goodbye and thank you to various people. But I'm going to ask Luke first in your 1 minute summation, last chance to persuade these voters.
Can I just say thank you very much? It's been a fantastic event. I think this is now, on personally, my 6th Hustings. We've got a couple more to go, but we're keeping on going with it. And they're very, very important for democracy. And it's so good that we have an area like this where we do so many of them. There are lots of different constituencies that don't do any at all, and it's a real shame. So it's a great thank you to everyone for this. This is a change election. You know, we've had 14 years, in my opinion, 14 wasted years in this country, where things have been just going either declining or stagnating. And we have an opportunity here in South Cambridgeshire to elect a Labour MP and myself, who can hopefully, fingers crossed, on the 5th of July, be part of a Labour government to really bring investment and real drive into this area, and to give this area its future back, to give the country its future back. You know, we've done it before. When we came in 1997, we had a country that was failing, and we turned it around, and we really want the opportunity to be able to do that again. I want the opportunity to represent the area that I live in, the area that has basically become my home because of the amazing community that I've been a part of. Please do consider voting me on the 5th of July, 4th of July.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming here, for listening to us, but also sharing your priorities and taking part in this vital democratic process. And I think what we've heard are that it's often the things that are local that really matter to us. You know, that's about our beautiful countryside and green spaces, but also balancing that with making sure that our young people can afford to live here, and that older people aren't stranded and isolated without transport, being able to get to see a GP. We've also heard that they're national. It's about health and social care. It's about our education system. It's about what we care about. And I think it's time for a change of government. And I think South Cambridgeshire needs a change in who their party and Member of Parliament has been. And if you do me the honour of electing me, you will have somebody who will listen to you, who will champion our area, and who will absolutely make sure that your needs, our needs, are heard when decisions are taken locally or in Westminster. Let's vote for that change. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I echo the thanks that Pippa and Luke have already expressed to you. It's very important that you come tonight, and to pick up David's point from earlier, it's very important that you vote. It matters less who you vote for than that you vote at all. There are 6 candidates. I flatter myself that all 6 of us would do a good job for you. Only one can win. The other 5 will be runners-up. That's just how these things work. But make sure you vote.
Thank you, James. Miranda.
Thanks. I just want to end by reminding you that the battle for control of number 10 Downing Street will not be won or lost in South Cambridgeshire. We are just one of 650 constituencies voting that day. What is definitely at stake here, and what you will be voting for, is the future of South Cambridgeshire itself. Do you want to be part of that supersized Govopolis city, with our precious countryside carved up and the wildlife chased away in this obsessive quest for growth? Do you think that this growth will make you happier or healthier, or make it any easier for the next generation to afford to live here? Or would you rather vote for an MP and a party who have a fairer, greener vision of a secure and happy future for us all? If so, then your vote for Miranda Fife Green Party is the only vote that counts. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all for coming today. It's certainly fine here. This is my second Hustings. My first one, I'm glad none of them were there for it because I got stage fright and couldn't finish the opening statement. But I think that this is a very important election. I think for me in particular, it's an important election to win an opposition that will fight for differing views in Parliament. We're looking at the moment at what we think is a strong Labour government, although that's not 100% certain. But I just want to reiterate some of the core pledges and some of the things that we'll fight for in Parliament for you, which is to reduce immigration, stop the boats, end the waiting lists, good wages for hard day's work, and affordable energy bills. Again, thank you so much for attending tonight. I wish you all a good evening.
Thank you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all so much for coming here to take part in what is such an important part of the democratic process. Many countries around the world and their citizens could only dream of what we have done here tonight, which is to put all of us under scrutiny so that you are better informed when it comes to casting your vote. I'm hugely privileged to have the opportunity to run in the constituency in which I live, in which I grew up, in which I went to school. I feel I carry certainly my mum with me on that journey. Being here in Sawston, I think, has really brought that home for me in everything that we experienced during our time with the NHS. I want to do her proud. I want to see our NHS working for more people more effectively, and anyone who has to go down the journey with dementia that we have, to help equip them for a better outcome and to endure what is a really tough time. I don't need to look at a map that was mentioned earlier to see the environmental challenges that we're facing. It's no to East West Rail, it's no to CSET, it's no to C2C, it's no to Honey Hill, it's no to the 5-day week, and it's yes to spending your money on improving your lives locally, better NHS, better education, and more police on your streets. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. So we've come to the end of all our questions, we've come to the end of our statements. I do want to give some thank yous, and I'm not going to apologise for tiptoeing slightly past 9 o'clock. I want to say thank you to Terry on the bell. I don't think Terry got quite the starring role you hoped he would, because our candidates were all so disciplined, so well done. Thank you to Father Will, who did the running with the microphone. The original administrative work to make this event happen, inviting the candidates and making this happen, so thank you. Thank you to John on the audio who makes sure everything is heard. I want to say thank you to the audience for asking such fantastic, insightful, thoughtful, well presented questions. I was hoping I was right when I said you were a sophisticated and intelligent audience. I was right, I knew I would be, so a big thank you for that. But I think I want to finish by really thanking the panel. If you look on the Sawston Facebook page and you happen across a post about potholes, you will find that Sawston has 1,000 pothole experts who will sit at home and say how all the councils are idiots, how nobody knows what they're doing, and if only they were in charge it would all be straightforward and easy, and why can't anyone see that? And of course none of them come up here and stand for office and put their head above the parapet and become the ones who are accountable for things. So whatever level of local government, national government, regional government people are, who put their head above the parapet and say, I will actually put myself forward to make a difference and not just moan about it on Facebook, I will respect them, and I respect these 6 people here who have stood in front of you for 2 hot, sticky hours and shown their dedication to this area. And I'm sure that the 5 who don't win will all still be involved in trying to solve the problems of South Cambridgeshire, and that has come across in everything that all of you have said. So I want to say thank you to that. A community is only strong insofar as ordinary people like you are willing to get off Facebook and moaning and actually get involved in making the changes that you demand of others. These people are not going to change the world on their own. An MP for South Cambridgeshire will only change the world in South Cambridgeshire if there is a whole gang of people behind them who are willing to make that change and be part of it. So, if you go away with any message or with any stirring of your heart to be involved in the things that happen in South Cambridgeshire rather than to sit back and moan about those who are, then let that be it. The vicar has spoken. About any Sunday morning and hear the vicar speaking if you want to. 10:30 Sunday mornings. So I am going to finish with that prayer, and I am going to take Miranda's advice and, if I may, edit the Speaker's Chaplain's prayer that's been used for centuries. But we don't care. So here we go. Our final prayer, which is the prayer I began with. Whichever of you wins, if you choose to be in the chamber at that moment, will hear this prayer at the beginning of every session. Lord, the God of righteousness and truth, grant to our King and his government, to members of Parliament and all in positions of responsibility, the guidance of your Spirit. May they never lead the nation wrongly through love of power, desire to please, or unworthy ideals, but laying aside all private interests and prejudices, keep in mind their responsibility to seek to improve the condition of the whole of creation. So may your kingdom come and your name be hallowed. Amen. Amen. Thank you all, safe journey home, and if any of the candidates wish to stay, then don't mob them. Treat them with respect. They are tired, exhausted, hot and sticky, but if you must, some of them may stay around.